You've probably seen it everywhere. In every Reddit thread or comment section, struggling producers will ask how they can improve their productions and mixes, and the answer that I most commonly see thrown out there is use reference tracks. This is incredibly good advice. However, to a struggling producer, that could leave you wondering, okay, well, how do I do this? What am I listening for, and what track should I use? Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through this as best I can so that by the time you're done watching, you'll have a better idea and potentially an entirely new process to approach how you learn to become a better producer. I found today's reference track on the NCS website, which is No Copyright Sounds. They allow content creators to use their music without fear of copyright strikes, which is fantastic. That being said, I was only able to get this in an MP3, and MP3s are great if you're just using them as a guide for production and arrangement, but if you're using them for mixing and mastering, you're going to want to get a less compressed or lossless quality file like a WAV. MP3s tend to cut out a bunch of the low end and a bunch of the super high end, so they're not great for using them to make mix decisions. But for today's example, it should be fine. Before we begin, please consider subscribing to the channel so that I can bring you and other producers more production and songwriting tips in the future. Let's go. Before we dive into Ableton, let's talk about picking our reference track. First, you're going to want to select a track that sounds good to you and that you enjoy and want to emulate. Figure out why you like this song and why you want to imitate it. Is it because of the bass line? If so, you may want to write your song in the same key, as the wavelengths of the notes in the bass line are large and can drastically affect how speakers react from note to note, and your key will determine what range of notes your bass line will utilize. Is it the vocals you enjoy most? Male and female vocal ranges differ. The range they're singing in can determine what other instruments you use and where they sit in the frequency spectrum. So whether you're recording yourself, hiring a top liner, or downloading samples from Splice, you'll want to find vocals in a similar range to your reference track so that you're still able to use the other instruments in your reference. If they have a low male vocalist and the synths and guitars and other instruments are in the higher range, but you select a female vocalist who is singing in the same range as your reference guitars or synths, you'll need to adjust the range of those instruments so the vocals will sit well in the mix. There are indeed ways to make instruments in the same range sit well together during the mixing stage. However, if you stray too far from the tonal balance of your reference track, it could lead to balance issues down the road in your track that may take away the characteristics you liked about the song in the first place. Last, maybe it's the drums you love. If so, spend time listening to some drum samples against your track to make sure you're using similar drums. If you don't, you likely won't achieve the result you're looking for. So now that we have a better understanding of why we're using our reference track, let's get it into the DAW and start our project. The first thing you'll need to do is drag a copy of your reference track into your DAW onto a channel like this. The next thing you'll want to do is go into your audio clip and come down here and make sure that the clip starts on the first note. Generally, there's going to be a small bit of silence before the first note actually starts. Then we're going to have to find the BPM. If you know the BPM, you can just change it in your DAW, and you don't want it to warp. You want it to stay at the same tempo as the original track, so make sure that the warp function is off. If you don't know the tempo of the song, you can turn your metronome on and play your track and try to line it up manually, like this.
Here comes trouble, putting on a show, like a domino, I fall.
After you have your track all lined up on the grid, it's time to structure it out. So you're going to go ahead and listen to your track, place a marker at all the points where the song changes from one section to another, like this. If you're not sure yet how to do that, just know that most songs are built in multiples of 2, 4, 8, 16, or 32. So every 8 bars, you'll usually hear some sort of change. Now, it may not be drastic and may be considered part of the same section if you have a 16 or 32 bar drop, but marking the major changes in the song is where we're going to start so that we can start to flesh out our project. So before we begin sound selection, we're going to go ahead and put a utility plugin on our channel and turn it down -6 dB. The reason we do this is because our reference track is already mastered and it's probably peaking at 0 or even above 0. And if it's peaking above 0, it can introduce distortion. But the real reason is while we're working on our track and testing things out against it, we need to make sure that it's at a level we can actually achieve during the production and mix phase. We're also going to go ahead and change our reference track from going to the master to going to the external out, which means it will bypass the master. That way, anything we put on our master channel won't affect our reference track. So now we can begin the sound selection process. I'm only going to show you this with the kick because the same process that I use for this applies to everything else in the song, especially your drums. Open up a drum rack, pull some samples in, and make sure that you set your levels to -6 dB so that it's peaking at the same spot your reference track is. When you're looking for samples, it's a good idea to start by looking for a sample pack in the genre that your reference track is. So if your track is a pop EDM track like this one is, go look for a pop EDM sample pack. So I've gone ahead and created a MIDI clip that I'm going to put alongside my reference track, and I'm going to A-B them by soloing one track and then soloing the other back and forth so I can hear without interruption what's going on with the kick drum. Does it sound like the one in the track, or do I need to try a different one? So let's give this a test. So it sounds like the kick in our song is more clicky and clean, and the one we just listened to that I pulled into the drum rack was a little more gritty and boomy. So I'm going to go ahead and try another one. So this sample sounded a little more mid to high range and doesn't have much of a low end to it. I don't think it would work for this song, so I'm going to try one more. That one didn't sound exactly like the one in our track, but it's not going to because our track is mastered and they're chopping off all kinds of transients and smashing things together, but it sounds pretty close, so I think that's a good place to start. You're going to do this for all of your percussion, and when it comes to all of the other elements in your mix, like your leads and your basses, you want to try and match the characteristics of them. If you have a plucky bass, you want to choose a plucky bass. If your reference track has a long sustained bass, you're going to want a long sustained bass. If it's using a big saw lead like this one is, you're going to want to use a big saw lead. If you stray too far from the sounds that are appropriate for the genre, it starts to get weird really fast. And while it's fun to be creative, if you want something that people enjoy listening to, sometimes you have to make compromises. When it comes to the production stage, you don't want to copy what they're doing in your reference track note for note. Remember, referencing is not about copying melodies and bass lines. It's about listening critically to what you like and emulating it. If your reference song is using a plucky lead and it's sitting in the upper mid frequencies, try to create a plucky lead melody in the upper mid frequencies. If you're making grimy bass house and your reference track is using the bass as a melody way down in the low mids, make your own melody and keep it in the same ballpark characteristically. It's important to pay attention to which octave on your keyboard that their bass lines, melodies, and chords are in. If their bass is playing in the 3rd octave and you're writing yours in the 2nd octave, then you won't be able to achieve the same tonal balance as your reference track. The same goes for effects. If they have reverb and delay drowning their vocals, but you don't apply any, then it will change the entire vibe of the song. Lastly, when it comes to mixing, use the A/B test that we used with our kick earlier in this video in an effort to balance the levels of your instruments against the levels of those same instruments in your reference track. Listen to your hi-hats. If you A/B your hi-hats against theirs and yours sounds super upfront and loud and theirs sounds like an afterthought in the background of the mix, then you know you need to go in and adjust them to match. Apply the same method to all of the instruments in your mix. Before we wrap things up, I do want to show you the tools that I use on my referencing chain to make it easier for me to hear all the different aspects of my reference track in order to make mix decisions. So let's check that out. So I've loaded my reference rack here, and I always start with the Julian loudness meter. This is a free metering plugin from Julian that you can download and use in your DAW. I use it specifically to let me know how many LUFS integrated I'm shooting for when I'm mastering my track. So if we listen, you'll see how this operates. So we're hitting around -5 LUFS. Now the reason this is the first thing on my track is because after that I'm going to put the utility that brings it down -6 decibels, and if we did that before the meter, it would mess up all of the readings on there. I've already explained why I put a utility on here for -6 decibels, so I'm not going to take any time. After that I put Span. Span is a free metering plugin from Voxengo, and it's a spectrum analyzer. So this plugin is going to tell you where all the energy is in your frequency spectrum of your song at any given time. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. So that's great for getting an idea of where you want your levels to be. If you A/B your track versus this track and look at them in Span and they look kind of close in terms of the shape of everything here, then you know you're on the right track. After Span, I have 2 more utilities. The first one is for mono. When I turn this on, you'll see that the mono is activated. And this is going to take out all of the stereo width from this track and allow me to listen to just what's down the center. Let's give this a listen. After that, I have an instance of the utility plugin with the sides only preset. What this does is the exact opposite. This removes everything from the mid and allows me to listen to just what's on the sides of my mix. Let's listen to this. So this is going to allow me to make mix decisions about stereo width and which instruments I want wide and which ones I want down the center. After that, I have my Ozone 9 Imager. This was a free plugin. I'm not sure if it's still free. You can check. I paid for it because I bought the Ozone mastering suite, but I believe they give the Imager away for free. And this has a meter in here that will allow you to actually visualize how wide the mix is. Let's take a look at this. So you can see when we turn it mono, we only have that little line that goes down the center of our graph, whereas when the width is introduced, you can see it spread out. This gives you a better idea of just how wide a mix is and how you can adjust your song to try and be as wide as your reference track. After my imaging plugin, I have an instance of EQ8 set to mid-side mode and set to the side, so I can just see exactly where all of the stereo width energy is in the track. Let's take a look at this. After that, I have another instance of EQ8, but this one has a hard cutoff around 100 Hz and 10 kilohertz. And the reason I do this is so that when I'm listening, it almost sounds like I'm listening to the song on a phone or a laptop speaker. This is the most important range of your mix. If you focus too much on the low end or too much on the high end, you start to lose focus of what's really important, which is the frequency ranges that most people are going to be listening to. If you can balance everything within this range and make it sound good, the highs and the lows will likely fall into place and just need a little bit of tweaking. Last, I have an instance of an auto filter here with a cutoff around 100 Hz. This allows me to kind of hone in on the very low end. Now I'm listening on headphones and I do my mixing on headphones, so this is super important because we're not able to feel these the way we are when we listen to this on speakers. This also takes all of the high end out, so it's no longer distracting us from really focusing on the way the kick and the bass play with each other. It gives us a better idea of how separated they are by sidechain and how different they are in volume at this low level. So make sure to utilize everything you have available to you to assist you in listening to your reference track. Using all of these different plugins gives you a much better idea of what it is you're shooting for when you're mixing your track. If you follow these steps really well, then by the time you're done with all of the production and mixing, the only thing you'll really need to do on your master channel is a little EQ, glue compression, and limiting, and that's it. Although I will say I prefer to send my songs along with their reference track off to my mastering engineer who can double check everything for me in his treated room. I highly recommend you make friends with your mastering engineer because you can learn a lot about your mixing habits from the feedback that they give you. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know what you liked and didn't like, and I'll catch you next time.